I never expected her to remember my name, let alone say it the way she did, soft, like it had been sitting with her for a while. It was late afternoon, the hour where the cafe thinned out and the windows started acting like mirrors. I was there more out of habit than hunger. Same corner table, same coffee I'd let go cold while scrolling through nothing. I came there when my apartment felt too quiet, which was most days. She walked in with that familiar hesitation, half a step inside before fully committing. That was the first thing I noticed about her. Not her age, not her face, just the way she paused, like she was checking the temperature of the room before letting herself exist in it. "Hi," she said to the barista, then glanced around. Her eyes landed on me, surprised, and she smiled. A real one, the kind that rearranges your breathing before you realize it has. "Hey, you're—" She snapped her fingers once quietly. "Ethan, right?" I nodded, a little embarrassed that it mattered so much. "Yeah." She smiled again. "I thought so." That was it. That was the moment. Not fireworks. Not anything dramatic. Just the fact that she remembered. I watched her order black coffee, no sugar, and noticed how she folded the sleeve around the cup twice, carefully, like it needed to be even. When she turned, she hesitated, then walked over. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from me, even though the place was mostly empty. "No," I said too quickly. Then softer, "No, go ahead." She sat, setting her bag down by her feet. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward exactly, but it wasn't comfortable either. It felt like something waiting. "How's your mom?" she asked. I blinked. "She's good. Still working too much." She nodded, stirred her coffee though it didn't need it. "That sounds like her." She was my friend's mom. I'd known that for years. Seen her at birthday dinners, in the background of photos, handing out napkins, and asking if anyone wanted more rice. She'd always been kind, polite, unremarkable in the way adults are when you're a kid. But this wasn't that version of her. This was her leaning forward slightly, elbows near the table, but not touching it. This was her eyes lingering when I talked, not drifting away like people usually do when they're waiting for their turn to speak. We talked about nothing. About how the cafe changed owners last year. About how she'd started coming here after dropping her son off at work. About how I'd moved back into town and hadn't really told anyone yet. "I saw you last week," she said suddenly. I looked up. "Here." "No, at the grocery store. You were in the cereal aisle, staring at a box like it had personally offended you." I laughed before I could stop myself. She smiled, pleased, then looked down at her cup. "I almost said hi," she added. Didn't want to be weird. I wanted to tell her it wouldn't have been weird, that I probably would have thought about it all night. Instead, I nodded and folded my napkin in half, then in half again, until it was a small square I kept pressing flat with my thumb. When she stood to leave, it felt abrupt, like a sentence cut short. "Well," she said, slipping her bag over her shoulder. "It was nice running into you." "Yeah," I said. "It was—" She paused, hand on the chair. "You still have the same number." I hesitated just long enough to feel it. "Yeah." She nodded once. "Okay." That night, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. An unknown number. One message. "This is probably a bad idea," it read. "But I'm glad I sat down today." I stared at the screen, toothbrush dripping into the sink, and didn't reply right away. Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 2. Expanding the conflict, I stared at that message longer than necessary. "Did you get home okay?" No emoji. No name. But I knew. I typed, "Yeah, just got in." "Thanks." Deleted it. Typed again. Sent it this time before I could overthink it. Her reply came after a minute. "Good. Roads are quiet this late." That was it. No follow-up. Still, I slept lighter than usual that night. After that, something subtle shifted. Not obvious enough to point at, but enough that I started noticing the spaces between things. Faisal remained mostly distracted with work, which meant I crossed paths with her more often than planned. One evening, I showed up to return a book he'd borrowed. She was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled slightly, struggling with a stubborn jar lid. "Here," I said, reaching automatically. It opened easier than expected. She laughed softly. "See, this is why young people are useful." I shrugged, happy to serve. But neither of us stepped away immediately. The kettle hummed. Rain tapped faintly outside. That too loud, quiet again. She poured tea without asking. My usual, no sugar. You remember a lot, I said. Some things, she replied. Not always the ones I should. There was a pause. Then she added, almost casually, after my divorce, memory got strange. Important dates slipped. Small details stayed. That was the first time she'd said it plainly, divorce. Faisal never talked about it. I hadn't asked. Sorry, I said. It's all right. She leaned against the counter. Quiet house teaches you how to sit with yourself. Not everyone enjoys that lesson. Something about the way she said it felt less like complaint, more like observation. Still, it landed heavier than expected. I told her, without planning to, about my own apartment. How sometimes I kept the TV on just for background noise. How I'd open messaging apps, scroll, close them again. She nodded like she'd done the same. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made things complicated. Because now it wasn't just politeness. It felt like recognition. And that's where the doubt crept in. She was my friend's mother. Mid-40s. Divorced. Carrying a life I barely understood. I was still figuring out rent payments and career plans. The math alone should have kept everything simple. Except emotions rarely respect math. I caught myself imagining small, harmless scenarios. Running into her at the grocery store, sharing tea without Faisal around, conversations stretching longer. Nothing scandalous. Still, I'd mentally shut those thoughts down the moment they formed. Risk sat quietly in the room, even when unspoken. A few days later, the power went out during one of my visits. Entire neighborhood dark. Faisal was upstairs on a work call, so it was just us in the living room with a candle she'd found. You don't have to stay, she said. I don't mind. We sat there, not really talking, just listening to rain and distant generators. She mentioned a movie she used to love. I admitted I'd never seen it. She seemed oddly pleased by that. At some point, she reached over, probably unconsciously, and brushed a speck of wax from my sleeve. Quick touch. Barely there. But she didn't pull back immediately. Her eyes lifted to mine for a second longer than casual. Then she smiled, small, almost apologetic. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 3. Heightening suspense after the candle night. I told myself to pull back. Not dramatically. Just fewer visits. Shorter stays. Normal boundaries. The kind adults probably manage without turning it into a personal project. For a week, it worked. Mostly. Then Faisal started making comments. Emmy likes you, he said one afternoon, scrolling his phone. Casual tone, but his eyes flicked up briefly. She says you actually listen. I laughed it off. Someone has to balance you out. Still, something tightened in my chest. Not guilt exactly. Awareness. Because I had been listening. Probably more than I should. The routine shifted again when Faisal began night shifts. Suddenly those Thursday hangouts happened earlier, or not at all. But somehow I still ended up at the house, dropping something off, picking something up, small excuses stacking quietly. One evening, I found her in the backyard, struggling with a loose clothesline. Wind kept tugging the fabric sideways. Need help? She glanced back, surprised, then nodded. We worked side by side, hands occasionally brushing as we clipped shirts in place. Neither of us commented on it. Just those micro pauses, breaths, slightly held, released. You don't have to keep coming over, she said after a while. Not accusing. Careful. I know. Silence again. You're young, she added. There's other places you should be. That should have been a clear boundary. Maybe it was meant as one. But her voice lacked conviction. More like she was reminding herself. I like it here, I said before filtering it. Too honest. She didn't respond immediately. Just kept adjusting a sleeve that was already straight. Classic deflection. I recognized it because I do the same. Inside, the house felt unusually quiet. No TV, no music, just a clock and occasional street noise leaking through windows. She made tea. Of course. When she handed me the cup, our fingers lingered slightly. Not intentional, I think. Neither of us pulled away fast either. That's when hesitation really settled in. Because I didn't know what she wanted. Kindness. Company. Something neither of us had language for. And if I guessed wrong, things could break in ways you can't casually fix. I found myself talking less, noticing more. The faint crease near her eyes when she smiled. The way she avoided sustained eye contact now, or maybe deliberately controlled it. At one point she said, almost joking, "We're becoming predictable." Is that bad? Predictable things sometimes slip. I wasn't sure what that meant. Maybe she wasn't either. Then the interruption. Front gate clicked. Faisal's voice outside, earlier than expected. Both of us stiffened instinctively. No reason to, technically. Still, she stepped back first. Physical distance restored in one careful motion. "That's him," she said unnecessarily. Yeah, neither of us moved toward the door right away. Just stood there, holding teacups that had gone lukewarm. Something unspoken hovered. I don't know who leaned in first. Maybe neither fully did. Just that natural conversational drift, bodies angling slightly closer. Her eyes lifted, mine probably already there. Close enough to notice her breath pause. Close enough that a sentence could have changed everything. She started, then stopped, and I didn't finish my own half-formed thought either. Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 4. Nearing the climax after that almost moment in the living room, things didn't snap back to normal. They just stretched thinner. Faisal was around more for a while, which helped. Group noise, shared jokes, safe distractions. But underneath, something stayed unsettled, like a glass set too close to the table edge. You don't touch it, yet you keep noticing it. I tried spacing out my visits again. Told myself it was the responsible thing. Adult thing. Didn't fully work. One evening she texted, "Nothing dramatic. Going for a short walk. Weather's decent. No invitation. Just information." Still, I found myself grabbing my jacket. The neighborhood park was mostly empty. Streetlights humming. Kids' swings moving slightly in leftover wind. She was already there, sitting on a bench, thermos beside her. Of course she'd brought tea. "You didn't have to come," she said when I approached. "You didn't have to text." A small exhale, not quite a laugh. We sat with space between us. Respectable distance. But awareness filled it easily. "I've been thinking," she said after a while. That sentence rarely leads anywhere simple. "About what?" "You. Me. Faisal. All of it." Her hand stayed wrapped around the thermos lid, even though she wasn't drinking. Knuckles slightly pale. "Microtension. I don't want to complicate your life," she added. The assumption there, that something was happening, made my chest tighten. "You're not," I said. Automatic. Maybe too quick. She glanced sideways. Not convinced. "It's just, sometimes I forget the gap," she continued. "Age. Roles. Expectations. Then I remember all at once." Silence stretched. I watched a stray leaf scrape along pavement. Easier than watching her. Because, honestly, I've been forgetting too. Or choosing not to remember. Then came the part that surprised me. "I saw you last week," she said quietly. "Outside that cafe near campus. With a girl." Oh, there wasn't a girl exactly. Classmate. Group project. Nothing charged. But explaining that suddenly felt defensive. "You look comfortable," she added. Jealousy wasn't obvious in her tone. More like quiet self-correction. Someone reminding herself of boundaries before crossing them. "That bothered you?" I asked before filtering. She didn't answer immediately. Just adjusted the thermos lid again, though it was already tight. "I don't have the right for it to bother me," she said finally. Not denial. Not admission. Something in between. The air cooled. She poured tea for both of us, hand steadier now. "You know," she said, voice softer, "after my divorce I promised myself I wouldn't lean on someone who could walk away easily." "That's not fair," I started. "No," she interrupted gently. "It's realistic." That stung more than I expected. Because part of me knew she was protecting both of us. Another part didn't want protection. Just honesty. Even messy honesty. "You're not easy to walk away from," I said, barely above a murmur. There. Almost a confession. Or maybe just truth leaking out. She looked at me fully then. "No polites mal. No deflection." Just open, a little tired, a little hopeful, which somehow made it heavier. "You don't even know what that would mean," she replied. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I wanted to. We were closer now, Not physically dramatic, just the slow bench shift that happens when conversation deepens. Her shoulder almost touching mine. Breath measurable. No one else in the park. No distractions left. Her hand rested between us. Relaxed. Reachable. And I kept noticing it, wondering, not moving. Because once something like that happens, it doesn't undo easily. She inhaled like she was about to speak again. I realized I had a question too, one I wasn't sure either of us was ready to answer. If we stopped pretending this was harmless, then what? Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 5. The twist after the park bench. She changed. Not dramatically. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it was subtle withdrawals. Replies slower, conversation shorter, fewer reasons to cross paths. The kind of distancing you can almost pretend isn't happening if you don't look directly at it. So I try not to look. First week, I kept things normal. Still dropped by Faisal's place. Still accepted tea when offered. But even that ritual felt different. She placed the cup down rather than hand it directly. Eye contact brief. Smiles polite, not lingering. Controlled. Like someone quietly restoring boundaries. I told myself it was good. Healthy. Necessary. Didn't stop the strange, hollow feeling that followed me home. Then came the missed Thursday. Faisal texted, Amy visiting relatives for a few days. Casual. No explanation needed. Except she hadn't mentioned it. Which shouldn't matter, but did. The following week, I didn't go over. Told Faisal I was busy. Half true. Mostly avoidance. I didn't trust myself to act normal if she suddenly reappeared like nothing shifted. That's when the overthinking started. Had I pushed too far on that bench? Said too much? Not enough. Imagined something that wasn't mutual. All those unfinished internal sentences looping. Sometimes I'd open our message thread. Scroll. Type something neutral. Hope the trip's going okay. Delete. Hey, haven't seen you around. Delete again. There's a particular quiet that comes from conversations that almost happened. A few days later, Faisal mentioned something offhand while we were out. She's been talking to my dad more lately. I didn't react quickly enough. He noticed. They're not getting back together, he clarified. At least I don't think so. But closure stuff, maybe. Closure. That word landed oddly. Sensible. Mature. And somehow destabilizing. Because it meant her pulling away might not have been about boundaries with me at all. Maybe she was sorting unfinished history. Maybe I'd been a distraction she decided she shouldn't rely on. Reasonable. Adult. Still didn't feel neutral. I saw her once after that. Briefly. Grocery store aisle. Both of us reaching for the same tea brand. She withdrew first. Oh. Hey. Polite conversation. Weather. Exams. Her relatives. No mention of the park. No lingering pauses. Efficient. Before leaving, she said, take care of yourself. Okay. Not goodbye. Not invitation. Just careful distance. And I let it stay that way. That night, I drafted a longer message than usual. Not dramatic. Just honest. I miss talking. If I crossed the line, I'm sorry. I don't want things to be weird. Thumb hovered over send. Long time. Then the practical voice kicked in. About age gaps, friendships, unintended consequences. All the sensible stuff people list after emotional decisions, not before. I saved the message instead. Didn't send it. Days passed. Nothing from her either. And oddly, I didn't feel heartbroken. Not exactly. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 6. The climax, the message stayed unsent for 12 days. I know, because I checked the timestamp more than once, like the number itself meant something. Like there was an acceptable window for honesty, and I'd already missed it. Eventually the silence started feeling heavier than the risk. So I went over. No dramatic plan. Just late evening, same hour I used to drop by without thinking. Faisal had mentioned he'd be working late again. I didn't text ahead. Maybe that was unfair. Maybe necessary. The porch light was on. Kitchen light too. Familiar glow. I almost turned back once. Actually stepped off the path, then stopped. That pause where you realize retreat has its own cost. Doorbell sounded louder than I remembered. She opened the door herself. Surprise first. Then something softer. Not quite relief, not quite worry. Hi, I said. Intelligent opening. A small breath escaped her. Everything okay? Yeah, I just needed to stop by. She stepped aside without hesitation. Same quiet house smell. Cardamom, faint detergent, something warm cooking earlier. Kitchen, of course. That's where we ended up. Neutral ground. She poured tea automatically, then caught herself halfway through. You still, no sugar, I finished. A ghost of her old smile returned. For a minute we did the safe talk. Work, weather, Faisal's schedule. It sounded like strangers politely filling space. Neither of us satisfied by it. Finally she set her cup down. You didn't come by for a while. You pulled away. Simple statements. No accusation. Still landed heavy. She didn't deny it. Just nodded slightly. I needed clarity, she said. About everything. My past. My boundaries. What I might be leaning on you for. Fair. Painfully fair. And I asked. And I realized silence wasn't solving it either. That opened the door. Slightly. So I stepped through. I kept thinking I imagined the connection. I admitted. Then I worried I hadn't. Both options felt complicated. Her eyes stayed on the table edge. Listening, not interrupting. I don't want to mess up your life. Or Faisal's. But pretending I don't value what we had, the talks, the quiet, that feels dishonest too. There. Not a confession exactly, but close enough to expose something. She exhaled slowly. You mattered, she said. More than I expected. That scared me. Not dramatic. Just truth stated plainly. Which somehow carried more weight. Silence again, but this one felt different. Less defensive. More shared. I'm not asking for anything reckless, I added quickly. Just honesty. Even if honesty means distance. She looked at me then. Really looked. You're kinder than you realize, she said. And younger than I forget. Quiet humor. Gentle boundary. Not rejection exactly. Not invitation either. Realistic. We stood there a while longer. Neither reaching for conclusions. Just acknowledging the complexity without rushing to fix it. When I finally moved toward the door, she walked with me. Habit, maybe. At the doorstep, she hesitated, then lightly touched my arm. Brief. Grounding. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for not pretending nothing happened. A small smile passed between us. Tired, genuine. Okay, she asked softly. I nodded. Okay. Friend Mom's hidden feelings that escalated into betrayal. Part 7. The conclusion, nothing dramatic happened after that doorstep. Okay. Which, honestly, was the first good sign. We didn't suddenly become inseparable. Nos sweeping declarations. Just a gradual easing back into each other's orbit. Slower this time, more deliberate. Faisal stayed part of the equation, which mattered. Transparency helped. So did time. Weeks turned into months. Sometimes I'd still join Thursday dinners. Sometimes not. And sometimes, separately, she and I would share tea on the back patio. Openly now, not hidden, not rushed. The ambiguity softened into something steadier. Not perfect, just workable. One Saturday morning, 8:47 a.m., oddly specific because she laughed at the exactness, I ran into her at the small cafe near campus. The same one where she'd once seen me with that classmate. You switched from tea, she asked, noticing the black coffee in my hand. Experimenting, I said. Growth or bad decisions, still deciding. She smiled in that familiar, slightly tired way. Then ordered tea anyway. Some habits don't need replacing. We ended up sitting outside longer than planned. Sun mild, traffic distant. No tension this time. Just conversation that didn't feel like it was balancing on consequences. At one point she said, almost thoughtfully, I like that we didn't rush to define this. Me too, I admitted. Definitions sometimes scare things off. She nodded. That quiet agreement again, the kind built from experience rather than optimism. Faisal adjusted quicker than I expected. Maybe because nothing was hidden. Maybe because he saw his mom lighter somehow. He joked about us both being old souls, which made her roll her eyes and me pretend offense. Life kept moving. Jobs changed. My apartment got less echoey. Partly because I stopped avoiding my own space. Partly because she started visiting occasionally. Casual dinners. Shared grocery runs. Normal things. The park bench became ours in an understated way. Not daily. Not symbolic. Just a place we'd return to sometimes, thermos between us, conversations easy. Once sitting there, she said, I don't feel like I'm borrowing happiness anymore. That stayed with me, because I didn't either. If you asked whether we're together, the answer's simple now. Yes. But it didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived through consistency. Showing up, leaving space, letting affection exist without constant analysis. Love, apparently, can grow quietly when no one's forcing it to perform. She still remembers my tea order, even though I drift between tea and black coffee these days. I still notice the small burn mark on her wrist when she reaches for the thermos. Some details just anchor you. And sometimes, late evenings, when conversation fades comfortably, she'll look at me with that same expression from months ago. Open, a little amused, no longer cautious. That's usually when I think, we didn't chase something dramatic. We built something livable. And honestly, that suits us, because what we have now isn't loud or cinematic. Just warm, steady, ours.